Jake Miller never thought he'd end up working on a dead planet at the edge of human space, but here he was. 23 years old, fresh out of technical school, and already tired of scraping dirt off ancient rocks that nobody really cared about. The pay was good though, and it got him away from Earth where everyone seemed to have their lives figured out except him. The dig site on Draken Prime was run by aliens. Tall, blue-skinned scientists from a species called the Velthians who treated humans like cute pets that had just learned to use tools. They'd hired Jake because human labor was cheap, not because they respected him. Most days, he just operated the scanning equipment while they made discoveries and took all the credit. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. Jake was running a deep ground scan in Sector 7, a place they'd almost given up on because the readings made no sense. The equipment kept picking up something massive below the surface, but also something that flickered like it was phasing in and out of existence. Dr. Verith, the lead scientist, thought it was just instrument malfunction. But Jake trusted his gut. He'd always been good with machines, understanding them in a way that went beyond the manual. So he adjusted the settings, went deeper, and that's when the screen lit up like a Christmas tree. There was something down there. Something big. They brought in the excavation drones. It took 6 hours of careful digging through layers of crystal formations that shouldn't exist on a dead world. The crystals were strange, almost organic, pulsing with faint light that the sensors could barely detect. When they finally cleared enough debris, everyone went silent. It was enormous. A skeletal form preserved in translucent crystal, but this wasn't any skeleton Jake had ever seen in a textbook. The skull alone was the size of a small shuttle, with massive eye sockets and what looked like horns curving back in elegant arcs. The body stretched back into the unexcavated rock, but what they could see showed 4 limbs built for both power and grace, and along the back, the unmistakable structure of wings. Massive wings that would have blotted out the sun. "It's a dragon," Jake whispered. The Velthian scientists turned to look at him. Dr. Verith's expression was the alien equivalent of amused contempt. "A what?" "A dragon. From Earth mythology. The old stories." Jake couldn't take his eyes off the creature. Something about it felt right, felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain. The scientists laughed. That universal sound of intellectual superiority that needed no translation. "Mr. Miller," Dr. Verith said slowly, like explaining something to a child, "this is clearly an unknown xenobiological specimen from a species that went extinct millions of years ago. Your primitive Earth legends have no basis in scientific reality. Humans and your superstitions. Charming, really." But Jake barely heard them. He was staring at the readings on his scanner. The biosignature section was showing something impossible. Faint, incredibly faint, but there. "Doctor, I think it's alive." More laughter. "Impossible. The cellular decay alone would indicate." "Look at the scanner." Jake held up the device. The laughter died. The readings were clear. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't completely dead. Something was still functioning inside that crystal prison, some spark of life holding on against all probability and reason. They ran every test they had. Confirmed it again and again. Alive, but barely. Suspended in some state between life and death that none of them could explain. Dr. Verith immediately called for reinforcements, more scientists, better equipment. This was the discovery of the century. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. The crew quarters were basic, just a metal box with a bed and a small window looking out over the dig site. He lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about that creature in the crystal. A dragon. It had to be. The shape was too perfect, too exactly like the pictures in the storybooks his grandmother used to read to him when he was little. His grandmother. She died 2 years ago, but he could still hear her voice sometimes, singing the old songs she learned from her grandmother. Lullabies and folk tunes that she said went back hundreds of years in their family. Songs about stars and wind and creatures that flew higher than mountains. That's when he felt it. Not a sound, but something else. A vibration, maybe, or a presence. It was like standing next to a massive speaker before the music starts, feeling the potential in the air. The sensation was coming from the direction of the dig site, pulling at something deep in his chest. Jake got up and walked to the window. The excavation area was lit by work lights, glowing in the darkness of the alien world. He could see the crystal formation from here, and unless his eyes were playing tricks, it seemed to be glowing just a little brighter than before. The pull got stronger. It wasn't painful, but it was insistent. Like someone calling his name from very far away, needing him, waiting for him. Something was dying out there in the crystal, and somehow, impossibly, it knew Jake was there. It was reaching out to the only person who might understand. The only person who might be able to help. Jake pressed his hand against the cold window and felt his heart beating in time with that distant pulse. Whatever that creature was, it was calling to him. And deep down, in a place beyond logic or science, Jake Miller knew he had to answer. Jake waited until everyone was asleep. The dig site was quiet except for the hum of the security drones doing their rounds. He knew the patrol patterns by now, knew exactly where the blind spots were. Getting past them was easier than he expected. Maybe he was supposed to get through. Maybe something wanted him there. The excavation area felt different at night. The work lights cast strange shadows across the crystal formation, making it look almost alive. Jake climbed down into the pit, his boots crunching on loose gravel. Up close, the creature was even more massive than he remembered. The crystal surrounding it was clearer here, and he could see details he'd missed before. Scales that looked like polished metal. Claws that could tear through starship hull. And the face, somehow both terrifying and beautiful at the same time. He reached out slowly and touched the crystal. It was warm. That shouldn't be possible, but it was. The warmth spread up his arm, and suddenly the pulling sensation in his chest got 1,000 times stronger. Jake gasped and stumbled back, but he couldn't look away from the creature's face. Then the eye opened. Just one eye, just a fraction, but it was enough. Jake forgot how to breathe. The eye was the color of molten gold, ancient and aware and looking directly at him with an intelligence that made him feel small and seen at the same time. Not human intelligence. Something older, something that had watched stars being born. Jake's mouth went dry. "Can you hear me?" The eye focused on him more intently. Jake felt something brush against his mind, gentle but insistent, like fingers tapping on a window. Not words, but feelings. Loneliness. Exhaustion. Pain. And underneath it all, a desperate hope. "I don't know how to help you," Jake whispered. His voice cracked. "I'm just a maintenance tech. I'm nobody special." The presence in his mind pressed harder, and suddenly Jake saw an image. Himself as a child, sitting on his grandmother's lap while she sang to him. He could hear her voice in his memory, that old lullaby she used to hum while rocking him to sleep. The one she said her grandmother taught her, and her grandmother before that, going back generations. Without thinking, Jake started to hum it. Quietly at first, barely audible. The melody was simple, just a handful of notes that repeated and varied, but something about it felt right. Felt necessary. The crystal began to glow. It started where Jake's hand had touched it, a soft blue-white light that spread outward like ripples on water. The light followed the patterns in the crystal, racing along lines and curves that Jake realized weren't random at all. They were deliberate, purposeful, like circuit boards or musical notation. Jake hummed louder, more confidently. The dragon's eye opened fully now, and the light grew brighter. He could feel something changing, some barrier breaking down. The creature's chest moved, just slightly. A breath. The first real breath it had taken in who knows how long. The entire crystal formation was glowing now, pulsing in rhythm with Jake's humming. He felt energy flowing through him, connecting him to the dragon in a way that went beyond anything physical. He could feel its heartbeat, slow and ancient, getting stronger with each note he sang. Then the alarms went off. Jake spun around to see Dr. Verith and a security team running into the excavation site, their faces twisted in horror. The doctor was shouting something in his own language, then switching to English. "Stop. Stop what you're doing right now." But Jake couldn't stop. Didn't want to stop. The dragon needed this. Needed him. "He's producing harmonics," one of the other scientists screamed. "That's impossible. Humans can't." "Shut it down." Dr. Verith commanded the security team. "Use the neural disruptors if you have to." The guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the dragon moved. Just its head, just slightly, but the entire crystal formation shattered like glass. The guards fell back, and Jake felt the dragon's presence fully enter his mind. What happened next wasn't like talking. It was like living someone else's memories. Jake saw everything. He saw dragons flying between stars, creatures of pure energy and matter combined, singing reality into new shapes. He saw humans, ancient humans from Earth's distant past, sitting around fires and singing with the dragons. Two species that fit together like puzzle pieces, humans providing something dragons needed to exist, dragons giving humans the power to reshape worlds. He saw the partnership that lasted for thousands of years. Dragons and humans building wonders together, healing dead planets, creating beauty that spans solar systems. All through song, through the harmonics, frequencies that touch the fundamental code of reality itself. Then he saw the betrayal. Other species, jealous and afraid of what humans and dragons could do together, spreading lies and fear. They called the harmonics dangerous, called them weapons of mass destruction. They hunted the dragons, killed them one by one. And they did something worse to the humans. They made them forget. Erased the songs from history, made dragons into myths and fairy tales. Convinced humanity they were just primitive creatures who got lucky with space travel. The dragons who survived went into hiding, into crystal sleep, waiting. Waiting for humans to remember. Waiting for someone to sing the old songs again. Jake came back to himself with tears streaming down his face. The dragon was looking at him with something like relief, like recognition. Like seeing family after being lost for too long. "You're real," Jake said. "You're all real. And we forgot you." Dr. Verith was backing away slowly, his expression a mixture of fear and fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Those frequencies are forbidden by galactic law. They destroyed the precursor civilization. They're too dangerous to exist." Jake looked at the alien scientist, then back at the dragon. He understood now. Understood why the galaxy had made the songs illegal. Not because they were dangerous, but because they made humans powerful. They made humans equals, maybe even superiors. And the galaxy couldn't allow that. "They didn't destroy anything," Jake said quietly. "You did. You killed them because you were afraid." The dragon's voice finally entered his mind, not in words but in pure meaning. A name, or something like a name. A feeling of vast wings and starlight and songs that could make dead things live again. And Jake understood that this was just the beginning. There were more dragons out there, sleeping and waiting. And humans still remembered the songs, even if they didn't know what they meant. His grandmother's lullaby wasn't just a lullaby. It was a lifeline. A key. A promise. The galaxy had silenced the harmonics once before. But they couldn't silence them forever. Not when humans still carried the music in their blood, passed down generation after generation, waiting for the moment when someone would finally understand what they were singing. That moment was now. The news spread across the galaxy faster than Jake thought possible. Within hours of the dragon waking up, every species with a communication system knew what had happened on Draken Prime. A human had used the harmonics. A dragon was alive. The two things that were never supposed to happen again had just happened at the same time. Jake was locked in a holding cell on the research station, but he could hear everything through the thin walls. The alien scientists were in a panic, shouting into communication devices, arguing with each other. Dr. Verith kept saying the same thing over and over in different ways. This was a catastrophe, a threat to galactic stability, a violation of the oldest laws in civilized space. Through the small window in his cell, Jake could see the dragon. They tried to sedate it, tried to put it back to sleep, but nothing worked. It just sat there in the ruins of the crystal, watching the stars with those golden eyes. Waiting for Jake. On the third day, a representative from the Galactic Council arrived. Her name was Ambassador Threll, an insect-like creature from a species Jake had never seen before. She looked at Jake through the energy barrier of his cell like he was something scraped off the bottom of a shoe. "Do you understand what you've done, human?" Her translator made her voice sound cold and mechanical. "The harmonics are forbidden for a reason. They nearly destroyed all life in this galaxy once. We will not allow that to happen again." Jake stood up from his bunk. "The dragon showed me the truth. You didn't ban the harmonics because they are dangerous. You banned them because you were scared of what humans and dragons could do together." Scared? Threll's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. "You flatter yourself. Humans are barely more than children playing with technology you don't understand. Your species has been in space for less than a century. We have maintained galactic peace for 10,000 years. By making sure nobody could challenge you," Jake shot back. "By hunting down every dragon and making humans forget who they really were. Believe what you want." Threll turned away from the cell. "The council has made its decision. The creature will be eliminated. You will be tried for crimes against galactic law. A fleet is already on its way. They'll arrive in 72 hours. After she left, Jake slumped against the wall. 72 hours. 3 days before they killed the dragon and probably him too. 3 days to figure out something, anything, that could change this. That night, the dragon spoke to him again. Not through the walls or the distance, but directly into his mind, clearer than before. It showed him things. Images of other worlds, other places where crystal formations sat undisturbed on dead planets. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Dragons sleeping, waiting, preserved in the same kind of crystal prison. The dragon showed him something else too. Humans. All across human space, in colonies and stations and on Earth itself. The dragon could sense them somehow, sense the potential inside them. Most humans had no idea what they carried in their blood, in their culture, in those old songs that grandmothers and grandfathers sang without knowing why. But the potential was there. Dormant. Waiting. Jake understood what the dragon was telling him. One dragon couldn't stand against a galactic fleet. One human singing one song wasn't enough. But if humans remembered, if they all started singing, if the dragons all woke up at the same time, then maybe things could be different. The problem was the communication lockdown. Dr. Verith had made sure Jake couldn't send any messages off the station. All the equipment was locked behind security protocols that Jake had no way to bypass. Then he remembered something. The dragon wasn't locked down. The dragon wasn't affected by electronic security or firewalls. The dragon was connected to something older than computers, something that ran through the fabric of space itself. Jake pressed his hand against the wall of his cell, thinking toward the dragon as hard as he could. Can you send a message? To humans? All of them? The response was immediate. Images flooded his mind. The dragon couldn't speak human languages, couldn't form words across space. But it could amplify. If Jake gave it something to amplify, the dragon could broadcast it across human space, touching the minds of humans everywhere with the same feeling, the same pull that had brought Jake to the dig site. Jake closed his eyes and thought about his grandmother. Really thought about her, remembered everything. Her voice singing the lullaby. The way she'd tell him the songs were important, that he should never forget them, that someday he'd understand why. He remembered every old folk tune she taught him, every melody that had been passed down through his family for generations. Then he started to hum. The dragon took that simple vibration and transformed it. Jake felt the power flow through him and outward, carried on frequencies that had nothing to do with radio waves or normal physics. The harmonics didn't just travel through space. They traveled through the connection that all humans shared, that thread of consciousness that made them who they were. Across human space, on Earth and Mars and the colonies scattered through dozens of systems, people stopped what they were doing. They felt something. A pull, a memory, a presence brushing against their minds. And they remembered the songs. The lullabies their parents sang. The old tunes from family gatherings. The melodies that had always seemed important somehow but nobody could explain why. On Earth, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, a woman named Lisa Chen started singing a song her grandmother taught her, a tune about stars and travelers coming home. On Mars Colony, a construction worker named Tom Bradley found himself humming something his grandfather used to whistle while working. On the mining station near Jupiter, a teenage girl named Amy Rodriguez sang a melody her mother always sang in the shower. And they all felt it. The connection. The knowing that something was happening, something important. They didn't understand it yet, but they felt the truth of it in their bones. Jake opened his eyes. Through the window, he could see the dragon standing now, head raised toward the stars, its body starting to glow with that same blue-white light from before. All across human space, people were singing. Billions of voices, all remembering the old songs at the same time. And on dead worlds scattered throughout the galaxy, crystal formations that had sat silent for thousands of years began to pulse with light. The dragons were waking up. All of them. At once. The galaxy was about to remember what it had tried so hard to forget. Humans weren't weak. They weren't simple or primitive or lucky. They were the singers, the partners of dragons, the ones who could reshape reality itself with nothing but their voices. The war fleet was coming, but they were about to face something they never prepared for. Something they thought they'd destroyed long ago. The harmony of humans and dragons, together again after thousands of years of silence. Jake smiled. 72 hours suddenly seemed like more than enough time. The singing didn't stop. Once it started, it spread like wildfire through human settlements across the galaxy. People who had never met were suddenly connected by melodies that had been sleeping in their cultural memory for generations. Factory workers on Titan hummed while they worked. Children on Earth sang in schoolyards. Colonists on the edge of explored space found themselves remembering tunes they didn't know they knew. And everywhere humans sang, dragons answered. On a forgotten moon called Verth 7, a crystal formation that scientists had classified as an unusual mineral deposit suddenly cracked open. A silver dragon emerged, shaking off thousands of years of sleep, its mind immediately reaching out to find the humans nearby. On the agricultural world of New Kansas, farmers watched in amazement as the rocky hills split apart and a dragon the color of wheat fields spread wings that hadn't moved in centuries. Jake felt all of it through his connection with the dragon on Draken Prime. He'd learned its name, or at least the closest thing humans could understand as a name. Kethris. The dragon had been waiting longer than human civilization had existed, holding on to life by the thinnest thread, hoping that someday someone would remember the songs. Dr. Verith burst into the detention area, his blue skin had gone pale. What have you done? There are reports coming in from 70 different worlds. The forbidden creatures are emerging everywhere. The Council is mobilizing every military force available. You can't kill them all, Jake said quietly. There are too many, and they're not your enemy. They don't need to be our enemy to be dangerous. Verith shouted. The harmonics destroyed entire star systems in the old wars. Your species is playing with forces you can't possibly control. But Jake knew better now. The dragon had shown him the real history, not the sanitized version the galaxy told itself. The precursor civilization hadn't fallen because of the harmonics. They'd fallen because they tried to use the harmonics without humans, without the balance that made them safe. They tried to force reality to bend through machines and technology alone, and reality had pushed back catastrophically. Humans were the key. They always had been. Dragons provided the power, but humans provided the wisdom, the emotional understanding, the intent that made the harmonics creative instead of destructive. The fleet arrived right on schedule. 72 hours after Ambassador Threll's visit, the sky above Draken Prime filled with warships. Hundreds of them, representing 24 different species, all united by one goal: eliminate the threat before it spread further. The lead ship belonged to a species called the Korthan, massive bear-like creatures who had served as the galaxy's military backbone for centuries. Their commander, General Vask, broadcast a message that everyone on the research station could hear. This is your only warning. Surrender the human called Jake Miller and allow us to neutralize the harmonic entity, or we will take them by force. You have 10 minutes to comply. Jake looked at Kethris through the window. The dragon was calm, patient, waiting. They both knew what came next. Let me out, Jake said to Dr. Verith. Let me show them what the harmonics really are. You'll die the moment you step outside. We all will. Maybe. Or maybe we'll show them something they've never seen before. Something in Jake's voice must have convinced the scientist, because Verith entered the code that released the energy barrier. Jake walked out of the cell and headed for the exit. Guards tried to stop him, but Verith waved them back. Jake stepped out onto the dead soil of Draken Prime. The planet had been lifeless for millions of years, nothing but rock and dust under a dim sun. Above him, the fleet waited, weapons charging, targeting systems locked onto both him and Kethris. The dragon lowered its massive head until it was level with Jake. This close, Jake could see himself reflected in those golden eyes. He looked small and fragile next to this ancient creature, but he didn't feel small. He felt connected to something vast and timeless. Jake placed his hand on Kethris's scales and started to sing. Not the lullaby this time, but something new. A melody that came from somewhere deep inside him, notes that he'd never heard before but somehow knew perfectly. The dragon joined him, and their voices merged into something that was neither human nor dragon but both at once. The harmonics flowed through them and into the ground. This time, Jake could direct it, shape it, understand what he was doing. He thought about life, about growth, about the potential sleeping in the dead soil beneath his feet. He thought about his grandmother's garden back on Earth, how she could make anything grow, how she'd hum while she worked. The ground began to change. It started small. A patch of green appearing in the dust near Jake's feet. Then another. And another. Grass pushed up through soil that hadn't seen life in eons. Flowers bloomed, bright and impossible. Trees sprouted and grew in seconds, their roots digging deep into the planet's crust, their branches reaching toward the sky. The wave of life spread outward from where Jake and Kethris stood, racing across the landscape like green fire. Hills that had been barren rock became forests. Valleys filled with meadows. Water began to flow from underground springs that had been dry since before humans existed, forming streams and rivers that reflected the growing light. Jake could feel the fleet watching, their weapons ready but not firing. They'd expected destruction. They'd prepared for an attack, for violence, for everything the old legend said the harmonics could do. But nobody had prepared for this. Nobody had prepared for creation. Then the first shot came. Not from General Vask, but from one of the smaller ships. A cruiser from a species that had lost their homeworld in the ancient harmonic wars. They couldn't see past their fear, couldn't accept that things might be different this time. The energy beam lanced down from orbit, powerful enough to vaporize a city block. It should have killed Jake and Kethris instantly. Instead, Jake sang louder, and Kethris responded with a frequency that made the air itself shimmer. The beam hit something invisible 20 feet above their heads and transformed. The destructive energy broke apart into pure light, harmless and beautiful, cascading down around them like a waterfall of starlight. The light touched the ground and more flowers bloomed where it landed. "Fire!" someone shouted from another ship. More beams came down, missiles followed. A dozen ships attacking at once, trying to overwhelm the defense. But Jake and Kethris didn't falter. Every weapon that struck their shield became light. Every missile became a shower of harmless sparks that made the new grass glow. They weren't fighting back. They were simply refusing to let violence exist in the space they'd claimed. The harmonics were transforming destruction into beauty, hate into light, fear into wonder. General Vask's voice came over the broadcast again, but this time he sounded different. Uncertain. "Cease fire. All ships, cease fire immediately." The attack stopped. Jake and Kethris stopped singing. In the sudden silence, everyone could see what had happened to Draken Prime. The dead world was dead no longer. A planet that had been a corpse for millions of years was now covered in forests and fields, rivers and lakes. Life had returned, not through centuries of terraforming, but through a song that lasted less than 10 minutes. Jake looked up at the fleet and spoke, knowing Kethris would carry his words to every ship. "This is what you were afraid of? This is what you tried to destroy? We don't want to fight you. We never did. Humans and dragons together, we can heal the damage the galaxy has suffered. We can bring life back to dead worlds. We can fix what's broken." His voice echoed across every communication channel in the fleet. "The harmonics aren't weapons. They're tools. And humans know how to use them because we understand something you forgot. Creation is always stronger than destruction. Love is always stronger than fear. And no matter how many laws you pass or how many of us you hunt, you can't kill a song. Songs live forever in the hearts of those who sing them." The fleet hung in the sky, weapons cold, nobody knowing what to do next. Below them, a dead world had become a garden. And across the galaxy, more dragons were waking up, finding their human partners, and beginning to sing the universe into something new. The Galactic Council meeting lasted 3 days. Representatives from every major species argued, shouted, threatened, and bargained while the whole galaxy watched. Half wanted to continue the war against the dragons and humans. The other half had seen what happened on Draken Prime and realized they were fighting against something they couldn't defeat with weapons. Jake stood before them with Kethris at his side, the first human to address the council in the 100 years since humanity had joined galactic civilization. Usually, humans were represented by diplomats who carefully avoided offending anyone. But Jake wasn't a diplomat. He was just a maintenance worker who'd learned to sing. "You can't put the dragons back to sleep," he told the assembled representatives. "And you can't make humans forget the songs again. We remember now. All of us. Every human child born from this day forward will grow up knowing what we are, what we're capable of. You have 2 choices. Accept us as partners, or spend the rest of your existence trying to fight something that only wants to heal and build." Ambassador Threll, who had wanted Jake executed just weeks ago, spoke up. Her voice was different now, less certain. "And if we accept this partnership, how do we know humans won't use this power to dominate us? The harmonics could destroy our worlds as easily as they restored yours." Jake shook his head. "That's not how it works. Dragons can't create destruction through the harmonics, not the way you think. They can only work with what's natural, what's meant to be. And humans provide the direction, the intention. We're not conquerors. We never have been. We're builders. We're dreamers. We're the species that makes art and music and poetry for no reason except that it makes life more beautiful." An old representative from a species called the Threen stood slowly. He was ancient, his scaled skin faded with time. "I have read the forbidden texts," he said. "The true histories that were hidden away. This human speaks truth. The partnership between humans and dragons was never about power. It was about balance. About making things whole. Perhaps it is time we stopped running from the past and learned to live with it." The vote took hours. In the end, it wasn't unanimous. Several species refused to accept the return of the dragons and cut off contact with the rest of the galaxy, retreating to isolated systems where they could pretend the universe hadn't changed. But the majority agreed to a conditional peace. Humans and dragons would be allowed to exist, to use the harmonics, but under observation. The galaxy needed proof that this time would be different from the ancient disasters. Jake gave them their proof. Over the next 6 months, he and Kethris traveled to dying worlds throughout galactic space. Planets that had been strip-mined until nothing remained. Worlds poisoned by industrial waste. Places where wars had scorched the ground until nothing could grow. Everywhere they went, they sang, and life returned. Other human-dragon partnerships formed quickly. On Earth, a jazz musician named Ray Thompson discovered his voice could harmonize with a dragon called Silverwind, and together they restored the Amazon rainforest that had been dying for centuries. On Mars, a teenager named Casey Brennan and her dragon partner brought water back to the dried-up channels, making the red planet green for the first time in its history. The galaxy watched in amazement as humans, the species they dismissed as primitive and insignificant, accomplished what their advanced technology never could. Healing came not from machines or science, but from simple songs sung with honest hearts. The council eventually agreed to the establishment of what humans called the Harmony Academy. It wasn't really a school in the traditional sense. It was more like a gathering place where humans and dragons could find each other, where the old songs could be taught alongside the new ones, where young people could learn to use the gifts they'd inherited. They built the academy on Draken Prime, on the world that had been dead until Jake made it live again. The main building sat in a valley surrounded by forests that shouldn't exist, next to a lake so clear you could see straight to the bottom. Dragons made their homes in the mountains nearby, and humans lived in settlements that blended into the landscape like they'd always been there. Jake became one of the teachers, though he never felt comfortable with the title. He was just someone who'd figured things out slightly earlier than everyone else. He taught students how to listen to the dragons, how to feel the harmonics rather than trying to control them, how to let the music flow through them instead of forcing it. His aunt had kept the place maintained, unable to sell it, saying it still felt like grandma was somehow there. Jake walked through the familiar rooms, touching old furniture, looking at photographs on the walls. Everything was smaller than he remembered, but it still felt like home. He found what he was looking for in a wooden box in the closet. His grandmother's journals, dozens of notebooks filled with her handwriting. Recipes and garden notes and scattered thoughts about life. And on almost every page, tucked into the margins, written in the borders, she'd written down song lyrics. The old tunes she'd learned from her grandmother, preserved carefully like they were precious treasures. Because they were. She'd known somehow. Maybe she hadn't understood exactly what the songs meant, but she'd known they mattered. She'd kept them alive and passed them on to Jake, creating a chain that connected the distant past to the present. Jake sat in her kitchen with Kethris waiting outside, too large to fit through the door, and he cried. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. His grandmother had given him something more valuable than money or property. She'd given him a legacy that had changed the entire galaxy. When he finally composed himself, Jake went outside and found neighborhood children gathering around Kethris, their fear overcome by curiosity. The dragon lowered its head gently, letting them touch its scales, patient and kind with the young ones. Is that really a dragon? A little girl asked Jake, her eyes wide with wonder. Yeah, Jake said, smiling. That's really a dragon. Are you a dragon rider? Like in the old stories? Not a rider. A partner. A friend. Jake knelt down to the girl's level. Do you know any songs? Any old ones your grandparents taught you? She nodded shyly and hummed a few notes. Just a simple melody, probably something she'd learned as a baby. But Jake could hear the harmonic potential in it, the ancient frequencies hiding inside a children's tune. That's a good song, he told her. Don't forget it, okay? Teach it to your friends. Teach it to your kids someday. Songs like that are important. All across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Children singing with dragons. Young people discovering they could touch the fundamental forces of creation with nothing but their voices. Families remembering melodies they thought were just entertainment, realizing they were part of something vast and ancient. The galaxy had its music back. And with that music came hope, real hope for the first time in thousands of years. Hope that dead things could live again. Hope that broken things could be fixed. Hope that the future didn't have to be a slow decline into darkness, but could instead be a song that grew richer and more beautiful with every voice that joined it. Jake looked up at the stars that night, Kethris beside him, and knew his grandmother was somehow aware of what had happened. The lullaby she'd sung to a lonely child had awakened dragons, changed the course of galactic history, and reminded the universe that the smallest, simplest things could contain the most powerful magic. All you had to do was remember to sing.